White walls. An empty room. On the desk, a laptop with the Apple logo and a chilled glass of green tea. And sitting quietly, like in Zazen, a man in a black turtleneck. Steve Jobs. With his eyes closed, he sensed a presence and slowly opened them. "You've come, Buddha." Beside him sat a man in white robes. He had appeared without a sound, simply being there. The voice that asks, "What is essence?" calls to me often. Jobs gave a faint smile. Even now, people keep bringing up Zen. They say, Steve Jobs practiced Zen. But eventually it all turns into, how do we use Zen thinking to sell products? That is why you never used Zen as a strategy. Zen wasn't a tool. It was silence. In silence, formless something would emerge. I just trusted that. Buddha nodded quietly. That something is what has not yet become words. The moment it becomes words, it's already not it. We were working toward what couldn't be spoken. Intuition becomes trivial the instant you can explain it. Buddha lowered his gaze. You saw tools that could change the world, but perhaps the one who created them was the loneliest of all. Jobs fell silent. After a pause, he laughed softly. You got me. Behind every finished product stood one who could never be satisfied. A cruel irony. Why were you never satisfied? Because completion was never the goal. The moment something was complete, I saw the next empty space, and I wanted to fill it. Before I knew it, my life was just the endless work of filling gaps. Buddha asked gently, "Then what was completion for you?" Jobs closed his eyes. It was the moment I felt, nothing needs to be added. Buddha's gaze softened. Those words, nothing needs to be added, are spoken only by one who has truly accepted. It is already here. Those hours sitting in the Zen temple, they were the most meaningless, and yet the most meaningful. It sounds contradictory, but maybe that was everything. The two sat in silence for a while. Even silence itself seemed beautiful. Jobs finally asked, "Tell me, Buddha, do you think it's really possible to design a life?" Buddha answered, "Life is not about arranging. It is about noticing that it is already arranged." Jobs nodded slowly. Damn. I guess I died without ever realizing that. And yet, you did stop once, and stood in the place of nothing to add. That moment was as close to a Buddha's breath as one can be. The room filled again with quiet. In that room, stripped of excess, only their breathing remained. Jobs traced the laptop's logo with his finger. The apple faintly reflected the night light. But Buddha, yes, when you say, it is already arranged. Sometimes that sounded like laziness to me. Laziness. If people just swallow, be content with what you have, humanity would never evolve. We searched because something was missing. We built because things were inconvenient. That's why I thought lack was the true engine of creation. Buddha answered softly, "Having a sense of lack is not evil. It is how you see it that makes the difference." "I see." Jobs gave a brief smile. "How you see it? Huh. That's surprisingly ordinary coming from you. Only in the ordinary does truth dwell." They both laughed lightly. There was no competition, no tension, only the quiet air of mutual understanding. Jobs, looking back over his past, murmured, "I used to be like a demon who tolerated no compromise. Toward employees, toward colleagues, toward myself. That is the form of one who deeply believes in ideals. But in chasing perfection too hard, I lost a lot of the joy of creating with others while laughing." Then do you still carry the question, what did I want to leave behind? Jobs tapped the desk, gently with his finger. Tools that bring humans closer to nature. Forms that dissolve the coldness between machines and people. That was the wish I put into my products. Buddha said slowly, to place in machines a quietude like life itself. You did not walk the path of Zen. You designed Zen. Jobs chuckled. Damn, that's good. Designing Zen, huh? If I were still alive, I'd use that as a slogan. They fell silent again. But this silence wasn't an ending. It was as if they were quietly watching for what was yet to begin. Eventually Jobs spoke. Buddha, tell me one last thing. What is waste? Buddha thought briefly, then replied gently. Much of what is considered meaningful actually rests upon very quiet waste. So waste is not waste. Jobs listened, then sank into a long silence. Finally, he narrowed his eyes and whispered, "That's good, Buddha." Suddenly, Jobs called his name. Unlike his usual detached tone, his voice carried a hint of rawness. "In the end, I wasn't very beautiful." "Is that so?" "I was more frightened than I thought. People called me a genius, a success, an innovator. But lying in that bed, what I felt was just being flesh and blood." Buddha closed his eyes and nodded. "In the end, everyone's roles unravel. What remains is simply life. And that mere life was so small, and yet so precious. I never expected that. Perhaps at the very end, you discovered the true simplicity. Yeah, letting go was so much quieter than I imagined." A gentle, wordless silence flowed between them. The sound of wind outside the window felt like breath itself. Jobs whispered, "I once said, stay hungry, stay foolish. But maybe what was truly needed was, stay empty." Buddha slowly opened his eyes and nodded firmly as if to receive the words. Emptiness is not nothing. It is the vessel that can hold everything. Jobs lowered his gaze, then slowly stood up. "Buddha, yes, just by being there, you help people reclaim their margin. That is because you listen to the margin. I will always be beside anyone, only when they quietly turn their gaze toward it." Jobs smiled. It was not the sharp smile of youth, nor the burdened smile of a success story, but simply the smile of a human being. "So, if I ever want to create again, will you be by my side?" Buddha smiled gently. "When you wish to cherish what seems wasteful, I will always be there." Their figures slowly dissolved into the light,